First of all, this is not cheap. And I didn't realize that when I was getting into it, okay? I was turning Christmas ornaments. And I found an old... Can you see that all right? Or do I need... down towards the headstock? Towards me. Okay. I was turning Christmas ornaments and happened to go looking through one of my old magazines from Woodcraft, and it said something about Christmas on it. And I got to looking at the page, and I have never tried inside-outside turning. And I've seen it demonstrated down at, I think it was at SWAT. So I followed the instructions in the book, and I made this jam chuck. I followed the instructions exactly, and it came out and it works. You have 1/4 of an inch holding 4 blocks of wood that you're turning at somewhere around 1400, 1500 RPM. And you have to shim you have to shim your 4 pieces of wood to get them good and tight. So you put these little shims in. And I didn't like it. And I felt it was kind of dangerous. I'm not as near as experienced as a whole bunch of y'all. I went over to John Solberg's and was talking with him about doing some stuff. And Doug was there also. And I was telling John what I was trying to do and that I didn't like the jam chuck. And I sure wish there was some way I could get that a whole lot more secure. And Doug said, just put a chuck on the other end. So you have a chuck on both ends. I never knew you could do that. And a lot of y'all might know it. You have to have a one-way, and I don't know if one-way is the only one that has them. They have threads on the end. It's 3/4, 8 or 10? 10. You can get an adapter. It goes on it. Okay? The adapter, I could not find one locally here in the Dallas area. I couldn't find it at PSI. I got a hold of Craft Supply, and they have one. This adapter runs about $40. And you put that in your tailstock. Okay. Then you have to take the regular adapter that I use on the spindle output, and you screw that on. And this is one of those you want to make sure you have a set screw, because this one is turning. It's turning the opposite way the headstock turns, okay? And then you do this number. These are 2 Nova chucks that I just happen to have. You have to get the 100 millimeter jaw set, because the 50 millimeter won't work on this particular type. What I wanted to make was this tree, Christmas tree. And you have to have 4 pieces, exactly 1.5 inches. The 100 millimeter jaw set will accept 3 1/8 inches of wood. So you end up with an extra 1/16 inch with the 100 meter set. And you put your normal adapter on, and then both of these adapters screw into your chuck. And I took it up today to about 1600 RPM. I didn't have any vibration. I didn't have any noise. Unfortunately, I was hoping to have something already started turning, but I didn't have the time, what with the holiday and getting the 100 millimeter jaw set. But I thought it was really neat. You don't have to worry about the security of your wood. It is all in regular chucks, and it's all attached between your centers, and that's it. Okay?
Now, Don was talking a little bit earlier about if you don't have time to complete your turnings and you don't want it to distort, you can soak in some alcohol or some wood with a little bit of soap in it. I've done that in the past. If you want to do that and really soak into the wood, you need to let it sit there for several days. The alcohol and the soap helps the moisture travel into the wood so that it can then draw out the internal moisture from the wood, and then you can gradually let it dry out. About a year or two ago, I had done some work with Ben Foe, and one of the tricks that Ben does with the wood that he turns when he finds a nice piece of wood is that he puts it in the freezer, and by freezing the wood, it keeps it from cracking until he's ready to turn it. Well, I'm not a production turner, and one of the things that I find is that guys that do production turning oftentimes will turn 50 or 60 bowls, they'll set them on a shelf, and it'll take them 6 months or longer to dry out, then they'll come back and do a secondary turning. Well, I thought about the freezing technique, and I had an opportunity with some downed trees to get some wood, and I rough turned this bowl, put it in the freezer, and then I had to go to work, so I couldn't come back and turn it again. So after about a week or so, when I had a chance, put it back on the lathe, there was no distortion. While I was turning it, first you got condensation because it was cold, but it made it turn beautifully, almost like wet wood. And then I did a secondary turning, turned it thin, and then I said, let me put it back in the freezer. So I put it back in the freezer a second time. Let it sit there, maybe overnight, maybe a few days, really didn't make any difference. Brought it out, put it on the counter. First I got some condensation, but it was a whole lot less condensation. I tried doing that one more time, freezing it and thawing it. And the freezing and thawing action apparently allows the moisture inside the wood to come out. And then once the wood was finally dry, after just a few days, I put a finish on it. This bowl is now over a year old, and no distortion and no cracks out of green wood. I've done this now a number of times with lots of different wood. The pieces I brought in here for a demo were all fresh pieces. I partially turned those, threw them in the freezer. I got back to it, took them back out, started working on it some more, freezed it, thawed it, again a second time, and no distortion and no cracking. So consider that. You can get your wood to dry out a whole lot faster and have minimal distortion by freezing and thawing a couple of times. Thank you. Now, is there anybody else who would like to bring up a demo or somebody? Yes. Oh. I don't really know. It was a tree that fell down in a storm we had last May. I don't know. But I made about a dozen bowls out of that tree. And each time I froze it and thawed it and had almost no distortion or cracking.
J.C. Robertson.
J.C. Roberts.
All right, I'm going to start out with some simple things I guess most people will know. How to get a hole in the center of a mallet, which is fairly simple. I just simply chuck up a little drill in the drill press and center it in the block in the V. Clamp this to your drill press, and when you drill, it will be dead center no matter how you turn it. So that was a very simple one. It took me a year to figure that out, believe it or not. All right, I play with these things just for fun. So I made a little, I can just simply moist taper, stick it in, drill a hole in a little piece of wood, and jam it in and turn it like turning a pin. And it just happens it's the right diameter for the chain to go through and glue it in. I'm going to put this on the bring back table for someone to win if they want it. I think I've had this last one up here before. If I can find it. If you ever wanted to drill a hole in a golf ball so that the insignia was dead on top, well, I simply turn a little piece of plastic, drill a hole in the bottom, and you center this to wherever you want it and chuck it up in your lathe, and you will have your hole where you want it, and it will put your golf ball. I was making bottle stoppers and using golf balls on top, so I wanted the name to be on top, dead center. So I made that little thing, which is fairly simple to make. That's it. Sir? It's just a piece of nylon. If you want.
So how many people are segment Woodturning? Right? Flat. So you side. Make it easy. You see I have rubber bands around this. So when this is a gluing cord, and so if all your segments are apart, you can see that all you do is just pull the rubber band out, nail goes there, all the way around. Now you don't have this thing sliding on the table anymore. It just makes it so much simpler to use something like this to make the ring. So now the ring's made. The way you center these, you take a board like this, and you can put your ring on here. You can easily see with the lines. You line it up to where the rings are. Take a hot glue gun, put a little dab here and a little dab here. You just need one on each side, and then you put this on the tailstock. Your bowl's over there, and now this ring is dead center on that thing. If you just try to put them together on a table or something like that, it's much easier to use the tailstock, something like this, to line it up square with. And then you have to, as you do this, each time, the piece that you just glued on has to be completely flat. So what you do is you take a pencil, you glued your ring on there, take a pencil mark around the ring, then you take the sanding block, whatever size, and you should touch it maybe 10 turns. You take it off and look, see where your pencil marks are gone. You've got to make sure they're all gone. And it's very
very simple, but if you've made them flat to begin with, it really becomes easy to put these together to use them. So that's all I have.
I don't know if this is much of a trick or just a fancy show and tell, but my wife retired first of the year, and so she's really heavily into, hey, we need to paint the whole house and all that stuff every weekend. Fortunately, she has stepped up, but I always joke with her with the idea that I have to continue to work to keep her in the lifestyle she's become accustomed to. And so she's really been trying to be very economical. Well, one of the problems that I have is I came home from the finial class that we just did last month, and she was oohing and awing about these finials. And the next thing I know, she comes out of the bedroom. She says, you know, I'm redoing all the drapes and everything else, the new things. She says, you know, they want an arm and a leg for that stuff. Next thing I know, she went up to one of our bedrooms. She had taken everything off, bought a couple little brackets, replaced the rod with PVC. She says, here's a picture. I just want some ends. And of course, the PVC some odd size on the inside, right? So yeah, I'm turning dowels, drill a hole, put this in. She just wanted to paint it black. Real easy. Next thing I know, she brings me a picture. I don't know if anyone can see that. And I'm going to set it on the lathe next. So I had some scrap, glued it all together. I said, well, that's probably fairly close. And the problem is you know, you're matching up about 4 of them for each window, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So I just did a little storage stick, threw them out. It only takes me about 15 minutes to make one. And so far, just with the 2 rooms, I've probably saved about $150 because these are expensive. They were like $30-something, you know? So I just want to encourage everyone to think outside of the box, I guess, instead of just bowls or whatever. You know, she just looked at it as, hey, if you can make a finial, you can make an end piece. And I've used my lathe for metal. I've used it for plumbing fixtures. I've used it for adapters for my dust collection. There's so many uses for a lathe. So that's all I have.